All right, welcome to the WowFactor Podcast. And today we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic, which is mainly leading the water on demand revolution. We have a nationally renowned entrepreneur dedicated to revolutionizing the water industry, which has reached the critical breaking point in the most recent years, despite being the most essential item required for the world's survival. So our guest, he is the CEO of a public company called OriginClear, and is none other than Riggs. Welcome to the podcast.
Samuel, it's a great pleasure being here. Thank you.
It's an honor. So how has been your week so far?
Well, it's been very busy because we're working on a number of initiatives to basically expand our program, Water on Demand. And in fact, today we combined with Water on Demand another division called Water Systems, which is the enabling technology. So now we have the technology and we have the finance to make them work together. So that was a big transaction. We just completed that.
So that must have been quite intense in terms of the activities going on.
Just a day's work for us.
All right, that's great. So as we take a dive in, the whole general public would like to know who Riggs is. So how would you best describe Riggs?
I would describe myself as very much an outside-the-box executive. I really tend to do things in a unconventional way, but of course, if it's too unconventional, then you can't accomplish anything. So the key here is to be creative, to be outside the box, but then to connect with what the world expects from finance and leadership, et cetera. So it's kind of a high tension activity between being very creative and being compliant.
So how do you find the balance? Because it's quite the challenge of being the unique gifting of both sides.
Well, a part of it was that my background was very unusual. Before the podcast, we talked about my background in shipping in the 70s. I was of careers before I ended up in high tech in the 80s, and then went into the .com in the 90s. And so I think my unusual background led to my thinking of things in a different way and in a not so compliant way. So whereas people would think about, well, I'm going to do things inside a corporate box and to, sort of go up the steps gradually, I'm looking for achieving something big quickly, compressing time, as Steve Jobs used to say, and getting things done much, much faster than normally they would expect. So it's really about my background. I was raised internationally. I worked in the nonprofit space. I was a merchant mariner. I was I did all kinds of marketing work. Finally, really, and I did things like import wine into America. And so all these things, I think, taught me a lot about entrepreneurship and business. And then when I got involved with high tech, I just loved it so much because the beauty about high tech is it moves very quickly, right? Adoption is very quickly. So that's what I loved about it. Water, of course, has been different, but I think I managed to speed things up.
So what was your driving force within all that transition of careers?
Well, really, my work in the nonprofit space taught me to try to make change happen in the world, not just, save for retirement, but actually to make beneficial change happen. And I think that's informed all of my activities. Also, being raised in many cities of the Caribbean and Europe led to my being more rootless, you might say. So not so much tied to a particular culture, but more interested in a sort of a worldview, right? And when you have a worldview, you start thinking about the things that really need handling that are not being addressed, right? And that's where I got so excited about water.
Interesting. So you've been in the line of entrepreneurship, and some people would believe that entrepreneurship may not require formal education. What's your take on that?
Well, no, I found that I had to do a tremendous amount of, for me, again, I had a wonderful opportunity in the nonprofit space to get a lot of training done. And then as I went up the corporate ladder, I learned this is one reason why it was so good that I did different things like import wine, or I worked in film for a year, et cetera, is it gave me a diversity of experience and a viewpoint. So I can look at things from not just a narrow point of view, but, a wide, eclectic point of view, you might say. And so, no, I don't think you can just, go, hey, I'm going to do this. I think you need to have not only the background, but also, as you know, Samuel, you need to know your tools. You need to know how to handle corporate communications, public relations, brand development, how to, disruptive marketing, strategic marketing, all these things, channel marketing. You don't just learn channel marketing by doing it for the first time. You have to learn it and learn that, your channel partners, you need to feed them, give them tender loving care, TLC, things like that. Well, that's only learned by actually doing it.
Right, true. I'm in total agreement with that. You don't jump into the trenches and do it. At least you have to have some form of education in that regard.
I have learned, however, that what does work is the iterative process of, I branded it I had a consultancy in the early 2000s, and I branded it as mistake-based marketing, meaning try something, learn from it, go back out again. It's an iterative process, and I'm very comfortable with the idea of micro failures, right? Fail early, fail often, as opposed to go the wrong way and fail big, right? So if I'm working my way through, I'm like, well, it's kind of like the way my Tesla drives down the road. It's constantly going, oh, no, that's side of the road there. No, that's not that side. It's constantly sensing the road and figuring out where to go, and in real time. And I think that's what you have to do in marketing very much.
True. So as we steer way more into your area of focus at the moment, I would like us to tell us more about OriginClear and why did you found that entity?
Ironically, I founded OriginClear. It was called Origin Oil at the time. We were launched as a company to do algae for biofuels, which was very sexy in 2007. And the price of oil was over $100 a barrel. There was lots of money to pay for alternative fuels. And we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. Origin Oil, meaning algae, was the original oil. It wasn't dinosaurs, it was algae. And so, and it's a perfect feedstock. The only problem is that fracking came along and dramatically dropped the price of crude. And people started driving SUVs again. And we realized that there was no market in the short term for algae as a biofuel. So we pivoted the company into water, renamed it OriginClear because we clear up the water. And that's when I had a big learning experience. This was about 10 years ago, because in algae, we were very sexy. We were all in all the big mainstream media. People were like so excited. Water, people take for granted. And I was stunned. I was like, wait a minute. As you said, Samuel, it's essential to life. And yet people take it for granted. They're very complacent about it. It's almost like breathing the air. You and I are breathing in the air. We're not, oh, where's my next breath going to come from? No, we expect the air to be there, and we expect the water to be there. But the problem is 80% of all the sewage in the world is released untreated which is a crime, really, 80%. Now, it's not the developed countries, but many, many countries. I saw a chart, for example, of all the most polluted rivers in the world, and so many of them are in China, in the Indian subcontinent, and also the Niger River, things like that, the Nile. These are tremendously polluted rivers, and there's no care for them. So what we're doing is yes, the ocean's big, but we're throwing all the bad stuff in the ocean, and eventually it gets really toxic. So the one result of all this complacency is that politicians don't allocate enough money to water infrastructure, which was built, decades ago, and then left alone. And so here we are with aging infrastructure, not enough money being spent on it. And so what do we do about it? Fortunately, there's a concept that started to emerge around 2016, which is called decentralized water, which means if you're a business, treat the water at the point where you use it. Don't just send it dirty to the city, clean it. And excuse me, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's very crystal clear, but in the mentality of the post-war era, everything was like, don't worry, we'll do huge public works, we'll take care of it for you, just send us everything. Well, that didn't work out. And today we're having to equip businesses to do their own water treatment, clean their own water. And they like it because there's benefits. Number one, they control costs. Number two, they can recycle, which normally they can't if they just send the water to the city. So there's really good reasons to do this decentralization. And what we found starting in 2016 was that growing adoption, and today there's tremendous demand. And what we learned is two major things you have to do. Number one, you have to have the technology to downsize the water equipment from the big utilities. And number two, you have to have finance to help these companies so that they don't have to come up with all the capital expense. And that's water on demand.
As you've decentralized decentralized it from the government in terms of the distribution of water. Was there any challenges that you have met with the government in terms of pushbacks for mainly the regard of decentralizing of water treatment?
Right. Well, in the U.S. at least, the government is delighted to see it happen because they are underfunded. What's happening is the standards for toxin levels in water are becoming tougher and tougher without the budgets to treat it. So they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't have enough resources. And so when you say, listen, we'll just give you treated water, they're like, great, fantastic, thank you very much, right? Now, there's one barrier, which is that we have to make sure that regulations support self-treatment by businesses. Sometimes that requires some local work, but in general, we find the municipalities to be very cooperative and actually excited.
So at least we see that support from the government. So if we're to look at focus now more the lens on OriginClear, what challenges did you face when you set up the entity, and how did you solve those challenges? Or mainly talk about the challenges that you faced and how did you solve those?
Well, so let's return to around 2013 when we pivoted into water. And at first we had a pure technology focus. We had this technology to clean the water, which came out of the technology of harvesting the algae. We converted to cleaning up the water. Pure technology that we would license. What we found in the water industry is that it's not very technology friendly. It takes 12 to 15 years for a new technology to be accepted in the water industry, and that's too long, right? And so what we tried very hard to get the technology into use, a lot of pushback. And so we said, you know what? Different plan. And so starting in 2015, we started developing our own capability to build systems In 2018, we launched a division called Modular Water Systems, which creates these modular water systems in a box that you just drop in at the business. And that is easy for the water industry to accept because it's not, all it is a new way of delivering the technology. It's not a new way of treating water. Rather, it's a new way of packaging the systems with an assembly line approach, and you can truck them on site, plug them in, and you're done. That has been very, very widely accepted. And in fact, modular water systems looks like we tripled our revenue between 2021 and 2022 because it started to really get accepted. So modular water was one solution. And then in 2020, we were confronted with the whole problem of, well, what about these businesses that aren't capitalized to do their own water treatment? And that's where we came up with a finance solution to say, listen, Samuel, you have, let's say, a brewery, and you need to treat the water because your local KL municipality won't treat the water. No worries, we'll take care of it. Sign here on the dotted line, and you'll receive a system. The system remains our property. You pay on the meter, the same way you're accustomed to with the city, and it's water as a service. So that's a very modern way of looking at business. Everything is becoming service. Something as a service. Then in this case, water as a service. So that has been very, very exciting for people. And so now we're having these things work in synergy.
That's quite interesting. So it sounds easy to set up a water on demand business. That be the case?
Well, it's easy for the customer. For us, it's complicated. Why? We have to, first of all, we have to have a partner on the ground. We're let's say in Texas, where most of our people are, and if you have a client in Seattle, Washington, how are we going to support them? So we have to have a local water company, a network of water companies that do the operation and maintenance, as we call it. And we have to have control over the technology and the installation. And we have to make sure that everything is done properly, because if the water isn't cleaned to a certain standard, we don't get paid. So it's very demanding on our side to make it work. For the customer, all he's got to do is sign in. People show up, take care of things, and problem goes away. So we simplify for him, more complicated for us.
All right. So that means you're essential for you to kickstart. You always have to have at least a local partner on board.
Yes. But that's actually a competitive advantage. You and I know about barriers to adoption by your competition. And if you signed up a whole lot of companies to be your support stations in different cities, you've got a competitive advantage.
That's awesome. So since you're now talking about cities, what would you say the current state of water on demand is in the US, and what can the governments do to increase the level of adoption for the water on demand business?
I see them as being really passive. In other words, they are so crazy trying to deal with their problems. I mean, you just heard perhaps about Fort Lauderdale had a 1,000-year flood a couple of days ago. Totally unexpected. They're dealing with constant disasters. And so they're very passive. The focus for us is to work with the specifying engineers early on, where they go, okay, we want to solve a problem for our customer. Oh, did you know that you can do this special pay per gallon model, and introduce it at that point early on? If you introduce it too late, then they already committed to a different way of financing it. So you have to do it very early. And that's why, again, the synergy between modular water, which talks to all these customers, and water on demand, which has the money, is essential.
That's great. So when you were starting the water on demand business, were there some myths that you had at the back of your mind, and did you manage to debunk those myths?
Well, the first myth is why can't the government take care of it, right? And the fact is it can. Here in America, we had, years ago, we had a monopoly, a telephone monopoly, AT&T, that was fine, except that it lacked a whole bunch of potential. When AT&T was broken up and turned into MCI and the baby bells, as we call them, and many other, and even the internet, it created a vastly larger market because it allowed more players to come in. And so what we have here is people going, well, what's the problem? Everything's great. And it's not. And so our job is to really get people to understand that there is an issue. And more businesses know this. They know they need to solve the problem, but the general public is not yet fully aware, and that's our biggest mission.
So to address that, are there more drives towards awareness for the general public for that?
Right. Well, of course, we do a lot of PR. I'm on a lot of TV shows. Once a month, I get interviewed at the NASDAQ, which goes out into mainstream media, Newsmax and Fox Business and Bloomberg. So that's all good. But in addition, becoming well known as a startup in America is actually a good way to publicize, because people are very keenly interested in innovative startups. And so getting that message out, graduating from the current market that we're in, public market, to the NASDAQ is a big jump that we're doing right now. Hopefully we'll complete that soon. So all these things will give you a lot of notoriety, and people pay attention at that point.
That's quite interesting. So this mainly in the US, this is mainly catching on as a water on demand. What about around the world? What is it like? Has the uptick to water on demand been quite good, or should we just say moderate?
We have not. What we've done is we decided to really formalize water on demand in the US. In other words, fully break it in, make it work. And then is to create partnerships with finance organizations in Dubai, Singapore, KL, Tokyo, South America, and they in turn would do the capitalization for their own water networks. So we want to create a sort of a network of networks that then spreads it, because one company can't cover the world. It's $1 trillion industry. So what do? We simply share the knowledge we learn here in the US to enable other players to play the same game. And that's going to be our next step.
So mainly what I see is what makes a successful enterprise in water on demand is the extensive amount of capitalization and your network of partners.
Correct. Now, what's great about the capitalization is, that many investors today are wondering where to put their money. It's like, I can't figure out, should I put it in the stock market? No, that's not good. Bond market? No. Oil goes up and down. Real estate goes up and down. What do I do? Well, there's a new asset class that we created that they can invest in and get residuals. And people are quite interested in that. They like that a lot. They're like, okay, that's super cool. And they have pent up, they have money sitting there that is not working, that they want to put to work. And so that's why the capitalization works so well. We're doing it a lot like oil well partnerships, which in America, regular investors can invest in an oil well partnership. And so we're just doing the same thing, but for water. And so as a result, people get to get rents from the water systems, essentially. And that's very attractive. So that's unique, because you can go after institutional money, but there's much, much more money in the middle class of investors all over America, vast amounts of money. And if you can get them excited about investing, you've got a very powerful financing source. So we've been very blessed so far with the acceptance of that investment model.
Great. So other than the two key points of capitalization and networks, what else would make a water-on-demand business successful?
Well, as I say, you have to have the plug-and-play technology, because it's much easier to raise money than to build systems. You can raise money in 2 days. It takes 2 years to build a system. So you have to scale it up. So one of the things we've been working on is assembly line production of water equipment, which, by the way, is not done very much in the water industry. It's still very, they build water systems like they build houses, whereas it should be built in a factory, pop, 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 pop. And so that's where modular water is really the breakthrough activity that we're so excited about. And combining that with the finance, we'll get some momentum. So absolutely, the assembly line technology is key.
Interesting. So for someone who is looking towards setting up a water-on-demand business, what would be your best advice for them?
Well, okay. So first of all, do they want to be working with us? Do they want to go on their own? Do they want to treat their water? In other words, are they a user, an investor, a potential partner, or a competitor? These are different roles. What I would say is it's a little bit early to try and set up your own water-on-demand business because there's so much to be learned about it. I would say eventually, if you're an international potential partner, we'd love to have you get involved. Simply go to waterondemand.net, put in your name. And also, I want to point out that if you go to OriginClear.com, I do a weekly briefing as a CEO that every Thursday night that I would love people to join, and you just sign up on the website. So, how you're going to work with us is a good question. Right now, we're welcoming capital, but we're going to be doing a lot more partnerships in the industry. So the main thing is to sign up and become part of our briefings.
That's good to hear. I hope you can get more people to sign up.
With your help, we will.
Amazing. So let's take it more on a grand scale. With your experience in entrepreneurship, what do you say would be the key causes of business failure?
The key cause of business failure, frankly, is a poor assessment of the operating climate, right? In marketing, we know that we have to survey in order to understand what messaging works. In a similar way, a business person needs to understand his business terrain, just like a general with a battlefield. What is my terrain? What am I attacking across a field? Is there a river? Is there a mountain? You really need to understand what the terrain you're trying to operate in. So it's very, very important to know before you go. I'm a strong believer in getting to know your operating environment. Now, as I was saying, you can do it with little trial activities. Try this. And as long as you don't commit too much resources, then your failures are learning experiences. If you commit too much resources, then your failures are permanent. So you want to almost like sending out an army, sending out scouts, right? You go out there and you find out what's going on. It's very important to have a lot of business intelligence about what you're about to do.
So it's more on taking on an agile approach of business development of sorts.
Very true. That's very, very well put. Very well put.
Amazing. So if you were to reflect back at your 19-year-old self, what would be your best advice to your 19-year-old self?
Oh boy, what I didn't know then. Well, I would say be a bit less self-centered. Be a bit what I've learned over the years is to treasure what other people can teach me and tell. And I was arrogant. I was an arrogant 19-year-old. I knew everything. And as a result, I would make phenomenal wins, but also phenomenal failures. And that's hard. So be more interested in what others can bring you. I think that's the number one lesson you can learn in life.
Amazing. So it's more on be cognizant of people who are around you and what they can offer.
And be interested. Like, the more interested I am in you, the more you're going to tell me good things, right? It's actually self-serving. If I'm interesting, I'm performing to you, I will learn nothing. Why? Because I'm broadcasting. So you need to turn it around and be receptive. And that is something that we're not always taught that. And I was more of an actor, and thought that I knew all answers. And of course, now I'm learning that the more I know, the less I know. And that's kind of how it should be, because every conversation I have, such as with you, it gets me to a place where I know more. Even you making me explain certain things, it actually gets me to realize certain things. So it's very, very productive. And the less importance you put on yourself and more you put on the other person, the better you do, in my opinion.
Amazing. That's all the quite sound words. I'm sure your 19-year-old self would be very excited to hear that.
He would like, really, Riggs? Like, yes, believe me, dude. This is an old man talking to you.
All right. Awesome. So as we wind this up, I would like to hear, what would be your final remarks to the general public?
What I fell in love with high tech starting in the 80s and then the .com in the 90s. Excuse me. And what is happening is that high tech is inserting itself in all industries. So even though water seems to be like a really low tech activity, the more aggressive you can be about integrating high tech into this space and other spaces, like trades, the more successful you will be. So high tech is the key, in my opinion, to all industries getting momentum and building up and modernizing, which they must do. We have to constantly build, because there's always more people, there's always more businesses, more toxins, and we have to constantly grow. And as a result, we have to think that way. So that's kind of fun, really, because it says that it's an unlimited game, isn't it?
True. So how would people locate you on the internet?
Go to OriginClear.com, and that's where you get to sign up for my weekly briefing. Please do join me. WaterOnDemand.net is the location of of our startup that is now doing fascinating things that I can't talk about, but really exciting. And join us there. Join us on Facebook at OriginClear, Twitter, OriginClear, all the above. And but be in my briefing every Thursday night. You're going to learn a lot, because we believe we are the most transparent public company in America. Every week, I tell you like it is. And that's unusual. So do join us.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the WowFactor podcast. It has really been an honor taking a deep dive into water on demand and learning more about you.
Samuel, it's been a great pleasure, and best of luck to you. Maybe let's check in 6 months or a year, okay?
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.